Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast. Today, of all things, discussing school spaces, gyms, sports fields, and dining halls from a counselor-centric perspective. If you're new to the podcast and you don't know about the expert, coach, counselor lingo that we like to use here, go back to episode 100 first, and then come join us for today. I'm Rob McLeod, joined as always by Brendan. How are you, Brendan?
Not too bad, Robert. It's been a little while, been a moment, but I'm glad we're starting with these big issues of how do progressive schools use gymnasiums and dining halls. Something that we originally were like, yeah, this is going to be like 5 minutes. And then as we started digging into all the hidden stuff that goes into how schools use spaces, became, as we found with many of these topics, became increasingly interesting and revelatory of the underlying kind of reasons why we do things.
Yeah, so if you're new to our shtick here, basically we're saying when we use a term like school, it's not quite the level, and the terminology is not quite the level we need to address issues in schools. We're kind of introducing this idea of an expert school, a coach school, and a counselor school. And we're going through all the minutia, all the big things and all the little things that make up a school, and seeing how each of these three, expert, coach, and counselor, approach these things in dramatically different ways. So today it's the counselor look. We've already looked at the expert and the coach approach. So yeah, let's dig into spaces in a school and how they are approached in the counselor. Maybe we do a quick recap. We'll start with gymnasium, sports fields, all the kind of phys ed type stuff. Maybe can you give us a quick overview of the expert and coach, and then we can launch into the counselor.
Yeah, so if we go back, way back into the traditional kind of area of school, what we're calling the expert-centered approach, you might see that a school had one room for one function. The gymnasium is the gym, the sports field is the sports field. It doesn't double up as anything else. It's not an auditorium. It's not anything else other than gymnasium and sports field. We play basketball in the gymnasium. We do gymnastics. We play soccer. We might have the soccer field outside or baseball, depending on where you are in the world. This might be a place that is beautifully kept, well kept by school. Might have somebody who takes care of it. That's their kind of role within the school. It could be a groundskeeper, or it could be a member of the community. You might have gardens with ornamental parts that are functional, and there's probably not a lot of student involvement in keeping these spaces, kind of how they should be. So this is the expert approach. It's a one functional place. If we move to the coach-centered approach, the gymnasium and the sports field, we're looking for efficiency, we're looking for purpose, and so you might have to use that space in clever ways and use it for multiple things. It may be that an indoor sports place is used throughout the day in several different ways, probably designed by the school community. Maybe the teacher or the outdoor ed kind of lead is kind of designing how these things are used, offering more opportunities for different sports. You might find a soccer field inside the track and field track. So, clever uses of space and pretty much kind of under the auspice of the school's athletics department. So that's what you might see if you're in a more expert-centered or a coach-centered. All sounds pretty normal. This is exactly what we'd expect from most of the schools we've been in. How would that differ if you were in this more counselor-centered approach?
Yeah, this is where Miles Davis comes in. We're going to deconstruct what we thought we knew about these spaces. So the idea of having a gymnasium, a sports field, all these things, those kind of disintegrate a little bit. And it's more that we have a space, or rather we have space at our school. And the functions of the space actually come from the needs of the students and the community. So it is basically a space, but pretty much anything can happen within it. And some of the space in the school will be used for physical fitness or sports or things like that. But that space might also have competition or, collaboration with other things that are going on. So we've got indoor spaces in the school and outdoor spaces. And within those indoor spaces and outdoor spaces, some of them might be used for team sports, for skills, whatever. but the how and when and like how we're constructing these things are very flexible. It's not necessarily like we've just got the gym and it's always being used as a gym. This is something that could change over time. Maybe the use of this space within time needs to change to meet those needs of the students in the community. And there is this piece where like it might not be for formal instruction, but most likely for some kind of student organized activity. And it's no longer a given that like sports or phys ed are even necessarily happening in the school. Definitely can be for sure. But if they are, it's going to be a part of the students and community's discussion on physical health and organizing the space and the sports and the activities in service of the needs of those students and communities. So that maybe, yeah, let's bounce this back and forth a little bit here, Brennan, because this is kind of where you and I, after like an hour of talking about this, like it kind of hit us on the head of like, oh yeah, these spaces, indoor and outdoor, are there to serve the needs of the students and the community. And of course, sports, physical wellness, skills, all these things can be part of that, but it's not assumed that we need a space for it to start with and then figure out what do we do with the space. We're more starting from what the needs are of the students and community and figuring out how to make the spaces work for that.
Yeah, it's kind of like peeling back layers. Say, we start thinking about the expert-centered approach. Of course, we need a place where we're going to do sports or school. We have PE lessons and we're going to need a place, and we do have sports. Move to the coach approach, and it's like, well, all right, we've got the space, but we're also going to have a very clear understanding of what we do in that. So we're going to design the lessons and the curriculum, and after school program is going to be very well organized. It's going to utilize that space really well. Okay, so we've got this situation. It's all going really well. And then we start to deconstruct it and say, but hold on. And this is where we start to think about who gets the decision make. Power is one way to look at it, how those decisions are made. Yeah, if we've already got a like the gym is being used every day for and everyone has to go and do the gym class, and then there's got a basketball team after that, and after school, and then a netball team or a baseball team or whatever. It's like, yeah, the second someone says, could I do skateboarding in here, or could I do some yoga or some parkour? And you go, well, maybe we'll fit you into the schedule. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we're well into the coach approach if you're thinking that way. Whereas like the counselor center would be like, well, we're not going to fill up that space with, we're not going to first of all say it has to be a gym. And we're also not going to say that it has to have gym lessons. It's going to be like, it is a completely open functional space that can be used for anything. So the kid who says, can I set up a skate park in here? Now, as we know from our circle school kind of like, discussions where we've talked about how decisions are made, it would still have to be taken to a discussion space, and you'd have to move it back and forwards. But it's certainly something that could be accepted. Yeah, you can use this for the next little while. You've still got to think about the community and who else wants to use it. But yeah, you can set it up as a skate park, and anyone can use it for that. And then it might 2 days later become something different, or a week later something completely different again, which may not even relate directly to sports. And so I think it's only when you think of that, which is actually how we would just think of it. We said, here is a space, what do you want to do in it? Which is just a very simple way to think of a space. But we've put so many things on top of it in school that even to think of it like that is very difficult. To be like, no, you've just got a space that you can do whatever you want to in that space. But where are the lessons? And what about the equipment? And what about the lines on the floor? And what about the timetable? It's like, yeah, we're moving away from all of those things because they're restricting us so that we can no longer just be able to have a discussion about what's important and what we want to achieve or try out or explore.
And I would also add that a conventional gymnasium setup is not off the table. That's possible, but it's more like we're starting with here's the space, and what do we, like literally the people who are here, what do we want from this space? And it totally could be that a conventional gymnasium school setup is what is desired, but it's not a given the same way that it is in the expert or the coach.
No, and then who's deciding on that? The thing is that it's when you walk into the school, it's already decided this is a gymnasium and the lines are on the floor and the resources are there and the sports team's going to have this block and the lesson's going to happen at 3 p.m. So that's the stuff to start moving away. Well, what if we didn't decide to have a gym class at 3 o'clock? What if the lines weren't drawn on the floor already? What if we didn't have those specific resources bought in advance ready for this thing? What if we just reversed that and said, okay, well, what do we want to do in here? And you could reach the same conclusion. It could be we want to play football. All right, well, let's put some lines down and get some goals out. Now, we'll get to the benefits and drawbacks of this approach. But obviously, if you already have the goals and the lines drawn down, it's much easier, and a time, it's much easier to play football. But to think that that doesn't cost you anything is the thing here, right? For you to have those restrictions in place sets you up for football, but totally means that a skate park or a yoga thing is much more difficult to do. So that's what's emerging from the group or from people. It's like, yeah, sorry, we can't do that because we prepared for something totally different, which isn't actually what is necessary now. But unfortunately, that's the stuff we got. So let's go with that. And so it's being aware of those decisions and who gets to make them and how easy they are to adapt into something different if that's what becomes important.
Well, let's get into the pros and cons. I think first for the gymnasium sports field, then we'll jump over to the dining hall, which has a lot of similar themes tied to it. So, some of the babies, some of the good things out of the babies in bathwater here. As we've been saying, it makes spaces in the school highly flexible and adaptive and ready for whatever emerges. There's not stuff already there in your way that has been imposed upon you. It's much more dynamic in that sense. As you already said, we can have a skate park today, but we're not bound to always having that and always needing to maintain it. There is a flexibility that this could be a yoga space tomorrow or, whatever it is else that is emerging and is negotiated and consented upon. And also, like, it brings the value of health and physical activity to the forefront and also making it personal. It's not necessarily a top down imposed curriculum on people. We are saying that no, there is a component of your life that involves your physical health and physical activity, what is most meaningful, and also what do we as a community want our approach to our health and physical fitness to look like, and how do we want to use the space available to us in order to support that. So definite positives, but what are some of the drawbacks here, O'Leary?
Well, just before we get into that, I just want to touch on that last part because the irony of making a space and making a curriculum, making a timetable, and everyone does the gym class is that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to spend very much time considering the importance of your health and physical activity. Now, teachers will bring that into the curriculum. Obviously, in most sports classes, there is a discussion on that. But what happens when the space doesn't mandate that you do those things? Then that discussion becomes ideally in a positive way, that becomes part of your inquiry into how you should spend time in this school or how you should be. Because it is like, okay, well, there is the kid that makes a spit park and does the yoga, but there's going to be students who, if a gym is not mandated, they may not do any physical activity. And it's kind of like, well, okay, well, that's also part of because there's kids that are forced into physical activity in coach-centered schools. Hate sports. Some of the kids, they hate the kind of sports they have to do, and they dread PE, and it's not fun. And as soon as they leave school, maybe they stop doing it altogether. So it's kind of like, okay, well, this peel everything else away. We have a space for gym and we have a gym class because we want kids to be physically active and physically healthy. Okay, well, instead of having that kind of buried, this is an ideal situation to bring it to the forefront to be like, well, okay, well, physical health is an important thing. So how is that kind of brought into the council approach? And that would be an ongoing set of discussions about how, what does it mean to be healthy, to have a healthy life, and how might you develop yourself and your lifestyle and your mental health and physical health? How might you do that? So the positive is that it gives the opportunity for that to be put central and not hidden behind a curriculum or a space. It's like, oh, it's right there. How are you going to be healthy? Now, that leads us on to the flip side, that it just means that without a dedicated space and without a dedicated time to do this, maybe you're just not doing it. Maybe you have a whole bunch of kids that are no longer doing any form of physical activity. And yeah, that's definitely not a positive thing. Alongside that, the idea that you can just change this whenever you want is just leads to chaos. It could be completely unsafe. That skate park, that kid, how did he piled a bunch of boxes on top of it? It's like, so um it can be incredibly confusing unless the administrative part of the decision making in these counselor-centered schools are actually doing their job properly. So, yeah, we all want to use the space at the same time. How are we going to organize it? How are we going to work together? If that's not done well, not only is it really confusing, really chaotic, it's a massive time sink for everyone trying to just negotiate this all of the time. You lose that reliable time and space to be like, well, we do my soccer club at 4 p.m. on a Monday. I know that that's there all the time. I don't have to keep renegotiating because some dude wants to do parkour. Um, it's so yeah, you're losing your consistency. And then if you look at the coach-centered approach, which is very much centered around goal setting and achievement, is a lot harder to see that achievement if there's no regular sports curriculum or sports time or even spaces for it. So you can see how this can be a controversial kind of point because it really strips away all of the structures that or questions all the structures. Why are all these things in place? Are they really benefiting us?
So you did the heavy lifting there on the bathwater. If we switch over to the dining hall though, because I felt in our talk you nailed the counselor dining hall. Could you give us the kind of the overview here again of our three types within the dining hall?
It's been a little while, so let me see. But yeah, so we go back to the traditional expert-centered kind of approach to school. You'll have a very functional dining space, which could be a classroom or it could be an actual dining hall. There'll be limited choice in the food you get. There'll be limited choice in your seating. There may be a focus on basic nutrition and an attempt to keep the cost relatively low. In terms of what's happening inside that room, there'll be a focus on self-discipline and manners. People expected politely respect each other. And it's likely that whatever's served is like a one size fits all, like everybody gets more or less the same meal. Yeah, so very orderly. And yeah, my son was in a traditional school many years ago, and we got the menu like for the entire month, like 2 months in advance. Like so, and very, very what we just described here is essentially exactly what we would have seen at his school. If we go into the coach-centered approach, where it gets a little bit more practical, and the school may have decided for practical reasons to build a space for eating, which could be multifunctional, or they may have explicitly decided not to do that because of the design, but it would have been a conscious decision based on how effective and efficient it was to have this eating space. You'll begin to see maybe tiered cost structures. You'll begin to see maybe people on additional support for low-income families, maybe. So, there'll be more variety of food and choice. You'll have a choice of maybe where you eat. You might even have a choice of what time you eat. There might be time slots, where you sit. And although things like manners and things are still, expected, they won't be a focus. It will be about getting kids in effective, efficient kind of food, and that will be the focus of the coach-centered approach. Yeah, so then we move into the counselor-centered approach to a dining hall. And if you've been listening to the first half, dining hall, Rob, a hall for dining.
Oh, do you
Tell
mean
us more.
do you just mean a space in the school
where food can be eaten?
where food can be eaten, possibly prepared? Yeah, so a lot of the notes that we gave with the idea of space for sports classes is applicable here. So we have space in the school. Now it's a matter of how do we use those indoor or outdoor spaces for how we want to be eating food together. Now, there might be a kitchen. this definitely can be a place where food is prepared, but it's probably not going to be the kind of like formalized, institutionalized, lunch services that Brendan was talking about there. The idea of like a traditional lunch lady and the pay and eat structure is very unlikely to exist, although it is quite possible. Just like we said, a conventional sports space might be desired. And, it could come from the group that they say, no, actually, we do want something a little more streamlined and we do want a service like that. If it is there, it came from the ground up, not from the top down. And we saw in the School Circles documentary an example of just a boy who wanted to make and sell sandwiches at the school. So he did. And he was bringing his own supplies and selling it and making a bit of money. And so this idea of like a flexibility of what options could be available for food is on the table. As we said, yeah, this idea that a one size fits all school lunch is just no longer there. And there isn't the sense that we have to eat together unless we're wanting to. Now, everybody does need to eat, but again, we open this up to inquiry and we say, okay, well, everyone does need to eat. How do we want to approach that? And how that looks could vary dramatically from person to person, from group to group, age level to age level, introverts versus extroverts, whatever it is. We need to eat. How does the community wish to approach that? Really is the layer that we're looking at this. So, we might have some people bringing food, some people preparing food, some people paying for food. But how this is done will be done at a differentiated kind of individual and community level. An individual has their say, and the community itself will discuss and negotiate and figure out how they want to do this. And this eating, to tie back to our conversation earlier about health, and as Brennan, you were pointing out, schools have phys ed programs and curriculums. Ideally, this lunch space is an extension of conversations or inquiries into physical health and into nutrition and perhaps social health. And, the idea of, do you need time with your peers at a break to recharge, or do you need some alone time to eat? Are you, all of those kinds of things are on the table. Whereas those kinds of discussions wouldn't be really so much a focus in the coach or the expert approach to lunchtime or to dining halls. And again, even just this idea that there's a lunch hour or a set lunch time is out the window, and we're deconstructing everything again here. The use of that dining hall or these spaces or eating is just an ongoing thing that could be happening at different times for different people for different lengths of time. And again, it all comes back to, we've got space in the school, we all need to eat. How do we approach that? So what are the pros here, O'Leary?
Well, yeah, I mean, just in that general kind of area, that once again, and it's kind of a fun, thought experiment to do, to kind of peel back what is a given school, that, we need to have a designated space for people eating, a designated, and for organizational reasons, yes, there's a lot of benefit to that. But this is at its core, it's putting the idea of a healthy relationship with food at the center. Just like with the discussion over the gym space, it's an opportunity to put a healthy relationship with physical education or physical health at its center. And so one of the benefits of this approach is that it does that. It brings to the fore the discussion on what is nutrition, what's a social function of food, how do we do that in a healthy way? And you having choice and ownership over. So again, in the positive, healthy approach to that is like, if you're discussing this and you're choosing, then hopefully the days of you having to sit there say one more bite, or how much can I eat, or like I don't want this today. It's like, now, we live in the real world, so we all have our preferences on food, and even if but the idea is that the more ownership and say you have over your food, and the more you understand it's the nutrition and the social values of it, it follows that this is part of a healthier approach to the whole area of eating, which again, similar with the gym, just because you put a space there and a time there and a menu doesn't mean that anyone's thinking about the food they're putting in their mouth, where it came from, what nutrition it's giving. It's if you automate all those things, then you just automate the process of standing in line, getting your food, putting it in your mouth. This again gives us an opportunity to unpack that and be like, why are we doing these things? Is this actually the best way to approach needing some food? Because you might need this at 11 o'clock, I'll be ready for it. And you might need it at 1, and you might need this particular, you might have different preference. And so, yeah, the everyone's diets, everyone's wants and needs can be met basically, and that is the benefit here, right? You can through the discussion, through building of consent and other ways, we can make sure that when you sit down to eat, you want to, and that's not necessarily what is happening in the culture, the expert-centered approach. But
to sum it all
of course, yes,
it brings the role of nutrition to the table, if you will.
yes, there you go. Beautiful. But as you can see already from the way we had to couch the language a little bit, although these are all very good and have the potential to be very liberating, very empowering. It's not going to sit well with everybody, and there are ways that it might not turn out well. The bathwater, as we call it. Robert?
Yeah. So you know what's nice about the coach and the expert approach? You just go eat and then it's done. And it doesn't have to involve the time required for conversation, consensus, negotiation, and all this stuff. This requires a lot more work to always have this ongoing discussion about everyone needs to eat. How do we approach that now? Because it's not a one-time answer. This is benefit to exploring that. There's only so much time in a week. And if you are diverting it to things like this, obviously some time prioritized to this just means that other things will not get the time. So a lot of time required to make plans with who, when, all these. Like the dodgy skate park example, there's always a chance, it's not a guarantee, but there's always a chance of losing some of that quality if we're not relying on professional services or if things are not as streamlined. And, worst case scenarios, and again, we're going to the extreme here. We're not saying this is the case everywhere, but, to what degree does the group have say in terms of things like safety, food handling, qualifications for equipment that's available, etc.? We do want to make sure that things are safe and healthy and appropriate for people within the schools. And now we are having to add this layer of checks and balances to ensure that what is there works. And finally, we've already mentioned this idea of extra work, but extra work also for parents to keep them informed what's going on. When your kid arrives to school, how are they getting? It's one more layer of communication to parents as well. It's not just the email you mentioned 2 months in advance. Oh, your kid's going to be having peas and fish on Tuesday 2 months from now. Things are evolving constantly in theory, and that brings pros, but it certainly brings some cons with it as well.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're from a coach-centered approach that's very much about efficient and effective curriculum, you're suddenly spending any time at all trying to work out what you're going to eat and then putting together the menu and getting food and having this is the kind of thing you do want, right? They'll have the afternoon, or you might have a food tech class or some kind of thing, but it's certainly not something that either the coach or the expert school is looking to have as an integral part of each day. Just the two things we've talked about here, like deciding what to do with your physically in the space, plus deciding how you're going to eat. That's potentially most of the day already, and that would just absolutely terrify a coach and expert-centered approach to go like, where's the multiplication? And it's like, and there are valid points, of course, and then we're kind of showing extremes, and as we've said many times, most schools will be a combination of these things. So it is likely that some of these ideas of discussions about, especially the sports ideas, not so much with food, mostly because it does require often professionals to prepare and, kind of kitchen kind of materials, things like that. But it's very interesting to look into how much we just take for granted and how much we could actually free up them for discussions that lead to action based around our physical health mental health, our relationships with each other. But again, all of this comes trade of time and power.
We did it. We turned a conversation about sports halls and dining rooms into a deep exploration into a conflict of value. Kudos to us.
It's fun, and it's really interesting to apply this to, what seemingly minor parts of school, and then you dig in and you're like, oh, maybe physical education and nutrition isn't that small. Maybe we do want to spend a bit more time on that stuff. So very interesting things that are hidden until you start to actually look into them, acquiring. How did we get to this point, and is it where we want to be?
How did we get to this point in this episode? If you've made it this far,
We just
kudos to you
started
as
and
well.
kept going.
Yeah.
One
All right.
foot in front of the other, Robert.
And on we go. Thanks, Brendan.
Aye. Thanks, Rob.